There is something vaster than the wide open sky, and that is my life. There is something deeper than the fathomless sea, and that is your life. There is something more precious than all the treasures of the universe, and that is our lives. Nothing is more barbarous than war. Nothing is more cruel. How many tears have mothers had to weep? How many precious seasons of youth have been ruined? How much happy laughter of children have been stifled? Change history, move the age, bring the world together. There is a path that the birds follow as they fly through the sky. There is a path that fish follow as they swim through the sea. There is a path that the stars follow as they travel the heavens. And there is a path of principle that human beings should follow. This is none other than the path of peace. Let's climb that mountain and cross that river. Let's dash over those hills and traverse that hill. Happiness is not something we attain by chasing after it. Happiness comes to those who live with the courage and tenacity. Likewise, peace will come to human beings when they lead lives of wisdom and principle. Peace is not something far away. Peace is caring for and valuing a single individual. It is bringing joy, not suffering, to our mother. It is reaching out to those who are different from us. It is having the wisdom to reconcile after an argument. And it is protecting our beautiful natural world. It is fostering a rich culture. It is refusing to build our happiness on the misfortune of others. It is sharing others' joy and suffering. Don't remain silent. Speak out courageously. Peace spreads where voices resound in song. Peace deepens through friendly dialogue. Peace endures when we are willing to learn from each other. The struggle between happiness and unhappiness is the story of human existence. The struggle between peace and war is the history of the human race. And the power of truth and justice for eternal victory resides within us. A person of wisdom once said, "When in doubt, choose the more challenging course. Hardships make us strong. Problems give birth to wisdom. Sorrows cultivate compassion for others. Those who have suffered the most can become the happiest. The flowers are smiling, gentle breezes are singing. The moon is watching over us. The vibrant energy of a strong, true spirit befriends the entire universe, transforming everything into an ally." Children of the world is one. We are all brothers and sisters in a single family. Let's live together harmoniously and in peace. Come, let's make our way towards the future. Let's shake the hand of the person next to us. Let's look into their eyes and share honest dialogue. Let's sing a joyous song together. That's the first great step towards peace. Let's build a land of peace. Let's connect with others who love peace. Peace is the brilliant light that humanity seeks. Peace is the sure path to all life of true humanity and dignity. Peace. Peace. Here we find the foundation for lasting human happiness. And the joy of true human history. Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. The poem I just read to you is called Peace, the Foundation for Lasting Human Happiness by Daisaku Ikeda, the founder of my school. And the video that you just watched is my school during the springtime. I need to give credit to my art teacher, Mr. Taguchi, for making this just for us just before I left. So thank you so much. Now that our hearts are ready, let's return to where we last left off yesterday. So I explained last time that the goal is to foster global citizens and nuclear weapons. By learning nuclear weapons was the means to do that. And that nuclear weapons are the most abstract, most distant, and it feels the most unrelated issue, especially maybe for high school students. And at the same time, nuclear weapons needs a multifaceted approach because it really, the complexity of the issue relates to so many different issues that's happening in today's world. So just teaching knowledge is not enough, but I mentioned about the poetic spirit, and that's why I started off with a poem today. It's really about fostering the heart and realizing a sense of mission, just like how you have experienced and you will today through my keynote. I also left you with some homework, the last sentence. We're trying to, through education, not foster a person of knowledge, especially now that AI can do that, but something more than that. And so today, I would like to talk to you about value-creating education in practice. And these are some of the questions that I will be addressing. What makes us truly human? What is a global citizen? What is the root cause of nuclear weapons? And what is the purpose of our education? Easy stuff, right? Wish me luck. So when we look at our education, we begin to see a factory model that's always been around. We try to manufacture and produce the same kind of product through the same method. And we're always looking for a better way, a more efficient way, a more effective way, even in education, right? But we have to realize, and we have to start realizing, that humans are not robots. We have to be carefully cared for through an agricultural model. The seeds all have the potential to bear fruit. But even if we provide the same amount of sun, water, nutrients, all the seeds will grow differently. This is kind of like education as well. It's not just that one method will be the answer to solving all of our educational problems. We have to look at each individual and care for them according to its need. And I've been discussing with you about the importance of global citizenship. You might be wondering, what is a global citizen, right? It's not a buzzword, it's not a magic word. Thank you so much for participating in my survey. This was one of the questions. What do you think a global citizen is? If I had more time, we would, do an entire workshop related to that. But the popular answer that I received from you is that somebody who speaks many languages, somebody who has traveled a lot, or somebody who is aware and concerned about the world rather than just ourselves. But I ask ourselves, is that really what a global citizen is? Because if so, then once you start caring too much, once you start knowing too much, then this massive responsibility that the whole world is on our shoulder, it's too heavy, right? So is that what a global citizen is, and is that what global citizenship is trying to do? And the interesting thing is that my founder of our school, Daisaku Ikeda, he outlined the conditions of a global citizen in his famous speech in Columbia University Teachers College in 1996. He mentioned that the first condition of a global citizen is the wisdom to perceive the interconnectedness of life. The second one, the courage not to fear or deny differences, but to respect and strive to understand people of different cultures and to grow from our encounters with them. And the third, the compassion to maintain an imaginative empathy that reaches beyond one's immediate surroundings and extends to those suffering in distant places. So these qualities of wisdom, courage, and compassion, these are his handwritings by Ikeda in Japanese, it didn't become theoretical, or it didn't become just about shouldering the problems of the world. Global citizenship, through his explanation, can become a practice that any human being can do in their daily lives, in their educational experience, to elevate their courage, wisdom, and compassion on an everyday basis. Where did Ikeda's notion come from? In order to understand this, I'd like to share with you the heritage of Soka education, which is the foundation of my school. So those of you who, I think for most of us, are hearing about Soka for the first time, there's actually about 15 Soka schools worldwide, from kindergarten all the way up to university. There was actually, just recently, we opened a school in Malaysia. There's no specific Soka method that we're applying to in our instruction, nor are our teachers are taught to train to do so. Each Soka school is uniquely different, just like the agricultural model that I just described. The father of Soka education is a school teacher, and he later became a principal, Mr. Tsunesaburo Makiguchi. This is him. And as a school teacher himself, Mr. Makiguchi was dedicated in creating a humanistic pedagogy unearthed from practice. This was in the early 1900s. He describes that pedagogy to this day have tended to those of scholars, leaning towards philosophical research. However, I hope to complete a scientific pedagogy based on the day-to-day realities of teaching. The core pillar of his educational concept was his theory of value. Makiguchi distinguished value from truth. He regarded truth as facticity, which is unchanging and can only be acknowledged, whereas value is something that can be created based on relationships. And I will give you an example. Let's take this glass of water as an example. To say that this is a glass of milk would be wrong. So the truth that this remains a glass of water is not going to change, and all the components of water. The relationship one may have with the glass of water is different. For a person who is dying of thirst, this water becomes a treasure. For a person who just drank a gallon of water, this cup of water might just be painful. So it is the relationship that decides our value. Makiguchi further identified that there are three levels to value: the values of beauty, gain, and good. The interpretation of beauty is aesthetic or sensory pleasure through our five senses that we enjoy. And gain is whether that value has personal benefits or for an individual's life. And the value of good is the same, but on a larger scale that encompasses one's community and society at large. Makiguchi emphasized that the quality of good must be at the basis when we are creating value. So let's go back to this glass of water again. The beauty of this water is that it can be so refreshing while giving a keynote at a nuclear peace summit. I actually left my water bottle here yesterday, so I'm going to enjoy some cup of water. Gain is that the water is healthy for you, right? And the good is that water has the power to generate electricity. Feels good. So, when we go back to values that we are creating in our education. At Kansai Soka High School, learning is an environment where students enjoy and work together, the value of beauty. And school becomes a place where they can develop their skills and discover their potential, which can be the value of gain. And ultimately, realizing their role in the global community and how they can contribute to humanity at large. That would be the beauty of good. So when we look at nuclear weapons, and we have been, what do we find about beauty? The beauty of is there beauty of nuclear weapons? Maybe that you feel very passionate about the issue, that it develops the skills and knowledge to better understand our world. And then, you're going to save the world, right? So that it can't get any better than that. The theory of value, beauty, good, and gain, is considered to be of one set, because values without beauty or gain would just be blind goals, just like sacrifice. Whereas the values without gain or good would be empty goals, like smoking. The opposite of beauty, good, and gain would be hate, harm, and evil. And I'm sorry to show you this as an example. This is the headlines of the New York Times, changing 3 times in a day. You can see on the left, and by the end of the day, how the headline had changed. So we are constantly being fed the colors of hate and harm and evil, especially recently. So peace is a struggle between this good and evil. I'd like to quote Ikeda here. Peace is a competition between despair and hope, between disempowerment and committed persistence. To the degree that powerlessness takes root in people's consciousness, there is a greater tendency to resort to force. Powerlessness breeds violence, but it was human beings that gave birth to these instruments of hellish destruction. He's referring to nuclear weapons. It cannot be beyond the power of human wisdom to eliminate them. So likewise, education also has the power to create good or evil. Maki Iguchi says, human beings do not have the ability to create matter. What we can create is value. So-called valuable human character indicates an abundant ability to create value. The aim of education is to enhance this value of human character, and the purpose of value-creating pedagogy is to clarify the appropriate means for achieving this aim. On November 30th, 1930, Maki Iguchi and Toda published Maki Iguchi's pedagogy as a book called The System of Value-Creating Pedagogy. This is the book on the left. The essence is everything that we discussed and the potential for each individual to create value. 2 years prior to this publication, Maki Iguchi and his disciple Josei Toda, who is also a school teacher, started practicing Buddhism, in particular Nichiren Buddhism, which emphasized the potential of each individual. When Maki Iguchi and Toda encountered Nichiren Buddhism, they were surprised to discover that it confirmed what they believed in concerning education. When deciding the name to Maki Iguchi's pedagogy, Toda suggested the name Soka, which means it uses the 2 Chinese characters of create and value to encapsulate Maki Iguchi's pedagogy, which aimed to create value. On the date of the book's publication, also became the official founding date of Soka Kyoiku Gakkai, which is in English, Value Creating Education Society. This was a group of educators who sought educational reform through Maki Iguchi's pedagogy. This is in the 1930s. So after the publication of Makiguchi's pedagogy and the start of the value-creating society, the Soka Gakkai, Japan was heading towards World War II. War distorts our values of ordinary citizens. It was a time when the emperor in Japan was regarded as a living god, and the definition of peace was to die honorably for the country. Going to war and dying for the emperor was considered to be of the greatest honor, and this was the definition of peace at that time. Schools became a place to train young, loyal soldiers who would be willing to risk their lives for the emperor. It was not to educate students to become fully human, like what Makiguchi mentioned, but it was rather the opposite. Makiguchi and Toda, of course, refused to teach for this false purpose. Their firm belief as educators was that education exists for the happiness of the child. This simple and yet fundamental aim was impossible to realize at a time of war, since education was solely aimed for the nation's militaristic benefit rather than for the happiness of the child. As you can see Copernicus on the slide, no one took him seriously when he said that the earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around. Likewise, Makiguchi and Toda, they stressed that education was not for the nation, but for the child, for the individual, bringing forth the true potential of each individual, and for them to create values of good was the opposite of training obedient soldiers. If teachers followed what Makiguchi was saying and his approach of education, it could not have been possible for these teachers to send their children to war. So value-creating education would evolve under what would be considered human history's most destructive, most inhumane times, and as education lost sight and could only see children as weapons, the stronger value-creating education shaped its values towards treasuring life. Ikeda writes, both Makiguchi and Toda firmly believed war is a source of misery, whereas education provides a means to happiness. War tramples on life, whereas education ennobles and dignifies life. War divides humanity, whereas education brings us together. War robs youth of their future, whereas education opens boundless hope-filled horizons. Based on this conviction, Makiguchi and Toda aspired for the creation of enduring citadels of education and an educational network that would unite young people around the globe. This, they were certain, would bring an end to war. And I think it's significant that we're having this youth summit for this very reason. It was their solid conviction that the triumph of education would mean lasting triumph for humankind. So Makiguchi and Toda risked their lives to continue promoting their belief in their potential of each individual to create the values of good. These actions and humanistic values were considered treason by the militaristic government at that time, and both Makiguchi and Toda were imprisoned as thought criminals under the fascist war regime. Makiguchi died in prison. Toda came out alive. With the death of his mentor and seeing Japan in the ruins of nothing left behind, Toda dedicates the remainder of his life to reconstructing the Soka Gakkai and reforms it as a Buddhist religious organization. Toda believed that this was the best way to promote value-creating philosophy in Japan right after the war, when people's values were lost and distorted. There were many suicides during this time because they believed that the emperor was the living God and they had risked their lives. Their children went to war for this cause, and yet all of their values in an instant crumbled as they lost the war. Before his death, Toda addressed the issue of nuclear weapons in his famous speech in 1957, which would be marked in history as his anti-nuclear declaration. This is about 12 years after the war. He said, "Although a movement calling for the ban on the testing of nuclear weapons has arisen around the world, it is my wish to go further to attack the problem at its root. I want to expose and rip out the claws that lie hidden in the very depth of such weapons. I wish to declare that anyone who ventures to use nuclear weapons, irrespective of their nationality or whether their country is victorious or defeated, should be sentenced to death without exception. Why do I say this? Because we, the citizens of the world, have an inviolable right to live. Anyone who jeopardizes that right is a devil, incarnate, a fiend, a monster. Even if a country should conquer the world through the use of nuclear weapons, the conquerors must be viewed as devils, as an incarnate. I believe that it is the mission of every member of the youth in Japan to disseminate this idea throughout the globe. Toda was a Buddhist whose first and foremost conviction was the sanctity of life. He was absolutely opposed to capital punishment. And yet he called for the death penalty for anybody responsible for using nuclear weapons. His reason for doing so was that his wish was to eternally immobilize the devilish functions inherent in human life that seeks to possess or use these nuclear weapons. He wanted to deeply establish in the minds of all humanity a way of thinking that denounces nuclear weapons as an absolute evil, a way of thinking that would serve as an inner restraint for the sake of preventing wrong and stopping evil. In order to defend his life, in order to defend all life, Mr. Toda used the word death, its polar opposite, in an effort to crush the demonic workings of evil. It was an act of conviction directed towards the absolute good of rigorously protecting life. The hidden claw to which he referred to was not about nuclear weapons. It was the evil within human life condition that would allow us to use such weapons, and for us to justify the taking of somebody's life, to create our own happiness upon the misfortune of somebody else. So in this sense, this declaration is not political, but rather addressing the very nature of evil that we all possess in our life. Even if we get rid of nuclear weapons, we would be throwing stones at each other. Therefore, the abolition of nuclear weapons became a practice that every human being can participate. And just like how Ikeda approaches global citizenship, this is all a practice that human beings can do in their daily life. Toda would meet a young man named Daisaku Ikeda, who would expand its movement on a global scale on various levels of peace, culture, and education. So this is the heritage to which my school stands, and the purpose to foster global citizens dedicated for peace. And here is a short clip of Daisaku Ikeda talking about education.
人間主義。人間は何のためなのか。人間はどう生きるべきか。人間はどう幸福になっていくべきか。人間がどのように平和に生きていくべきか。というところに最大の眼目を置いて、根本を置いて、すべての学問も教育も指導者も考えていかねばならない。教育によっていかようにでも人間は変わる。生命の中に善も悪もあるとおり、教育によってその善も出せるし、悪も出し合う。悪の方を出したのが難解とないなき多くの戦争、暴力。これを人間教育、人間の幸福のため、自由のため、平和のために教育をするんだ。教育はあるんだと。その一番の根本的な課題に焦点を当てる。その教育が21世紀を開く世界的な人類的な重要なポイントです。
So Ikeda approaches education on the values of human education, which is developing the values of character. Ikeda states that Being born human does not make one a human being, but through the dynamic process of learning and creating value through our experiences with one another, we are educated to fully unearth our potential. Human education is an action of being and becoming fully human. In other words, becoming a better and truer self and building our character. Ikeda says that the ultimate goal of Soka, or value-creating education, is to foster people of character who continuously strive for the greatest good of peace, who are committed to protecting the sanctity of life, and who are capable of creating value even under the most difficult circumstances. So, we come back to my school, Kansai Soka High School, and reflect on everything that I shared with you yesterday. This motto, to never build your own happiness upon the misfortune of others, and the practice of wisdom, courage, and compassion, and addressing the four fields of peace, environment, development, and human rights, and creating various programs and experiences to raise global citizens. And I shared with you yesterday about our trip to Hiroshima. This year, we had a chance to go to Nagasaki as well. And my students met with a granddaughter whose grandfather actually had experienced and survived both the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This man, Mr. Yamaguchi, I'd like to share his experience with you today.
今から65年前、昭和20年8月6日広島、9日長崎において2発の原子爆弾が炸裂。山口さんの運命を大きく変えました。
The kind of experiences that my students go through as they visit Nagasaki or Hiroshima. And I shared with you this comment from my student after going on these trips. I'd like to read it again. I learned many important things through Hiroshima fieldwork. First, my views of nuclear weapons have changed. Before going on the fieldwork, I learned about nuclear deterrence theory, and I was somewhat convinced. Although I knew how inhumane nuclear weapons are, I couldn't refute against the idea. However, through hearing the testimonies of hibakshas, visiting the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, and listening to the poem of survivors, I was disgusted that we can justify having weapons that has the power to make people suffer this much. A world that has such weapons exist is like letting evil exist. This made me realize that international security that depends on threat is not correct, and that true international security should be based on trust. And there's actually more. Second, I learned what was truly behind the war. As I studied more and more about the war, I felt that every single person on both sides are all victims. America dropped the atomic bomb in Japan, but Japan initially attacked Pearl Harbor. We emphasize on being the victims of the A-bomb, but I came to learn that Japan also had a dark history of illegally producing poison gas as weapons. It tormented and killed many Chinese people and even harmed the workers of the mill who were making these weapons. Who or what is behind all of this torment and misery? I think it is fundamentally hidden in the egoism and the selfishness that we all have in our minds. When we have thoughts that justifies the suffering of others in order to protect oneself, that sad spirit is the true cause of war. World War II, in the first place, was started by our bloc economy system that tries to protect the development of our own country, and the fascism that tries to protect one's country by invading other countries. The first step towards world peace is to overcome our own egoism and have the strength to be considerate and caring towards others. Without this heart, we will continue to repeat the same tragedy. You can see that her knowledge of nuclear weapons evolved as she was able to find a real connection to the problem and further identify the root cause, which is not about nuclear weapons per se, but our own egoism and the selfishness that allows us to justify the suffering of others in order to protect ourselves. This is just one of millions of examples of how knowledge transformed into value. So, as I keep mentioning, SOCA is not a fixed method, but treasuring the values of our heritage and making it our mission to learn and to become global citizens who can create peace based on mottos that we cherish. And I think that we are also creating mottos and posters after this. So please keep in mind that mottos are not just simply words. Just like wisdom, courage, and compassion, they can become a practice of our daily life. So let's look back at the questions that we first started with. They don't look so scary anymore. We're human beings that have a poetic spirit who can transform our learning into a sense of mission. That's what makes us truly human. A global citizen is not theoretical or something only a certain group of people can do. It is the practice of wisdom, courage, and compassion that every human being can challenge and deepen in everyday life. The root cause of nuclear weapons is the evil that human beings all have inside that tries to justify that we can create our own happiness upon others' misfortune. And the true purpose of education is for the happiness of the individual and for them to realize their limitless potential to creating the values of beauty, gain, and good. So I leave you again with this last quote. Young people are the future. They must have a say in the world that they are inheriting and must play a major part in resolving the nuclear threat. Youth, cry out even more strongly and widely for justice. Youth of the new century, resolutely extend our alliance for lasting peace. Dash to the world, to the future. These are the practices of value-creating education at Kansai Soka High School. On behalf of Kansai Soka High School, thank you very much.